Welcome back to Unknown Capital. This weekend we had the trilogy fight, Daniel Cormier versus Stipe Miocic. We're going to be telling you who wins this weekend. This weekend is going to determine who the greatest heavyweight of all time is. From watching the last two fights, I personally think Stipe Miocic is going to win this weekend.
I think Daniel Cormier is going to win from what I've seen from the last two fights.
DC has a lot of faults in this game that I think Stipe Miocic will take advantage of.
Bro, Stipe only fights once a year, bro. He doesn't know what to do. Either become a firefighter or become a UFC fighter. Choose one.
So this weekend is going to determine who's the greatest heavyweight of all time. And right now, I personally think Stipe is going to win that fight. If you look over to the last two fights, I understand even though that Daniel Cormier landed the most strikes in heavyweight history, and in the second fight, 181 strikes landed, but Stipe was still in that fight, and even though he was taking a lot of damage, it shows that he has a good chin. But all he has to do really is keep maintaining that distance, because all that Daniel Cormier depends on is trying to get close to his opponent. So he's always marching down his opponents. But what we see John Jones do is literally make that space, and that's why he was able to land a head kick at the end. But Stipe was making the mistake of trying to get close to him. Every time when he leads with a jab and a cross, he always tries to clinch with him, which is the worst thing to do with someone like DC. But I think Stipe can learn from the last two fights. Stipe is the taller fighter. And as he's going up against DC, who's shorter, he needs to maintain that distance because he knows DC can't reach him. So easily, Stipe can just use his footwork and counter him whilst DC is marching him down.
This is why I think Stipe is going to lose this fight. DC's wrestling is light years ahead of him, UFC. There's many reasons why many opponents can't beat DC. Let's take the example of Anthony Rumble Johnson. Everyone said that he was one of the hardest hitting light heavyweight people in the UFC, but DC just used his wrestling, took him down and beat him twice. And I think it's going to be the same thing with Stipe, because with Stipe, even though his wrestling, he has good wrestling takedown. DC's offense is like, he comes from those gyms where Khabib trains, where Luke Rockhold trains, and many other fighters. So I think DC can use his wrestling to his advantage.
To be the smarter fighter. He doesn't have to get too close to Cormier, because if he does, he'll just get caught in the clinch or he'll get out wrestled. But he has been the smarter fighter before. With Francis Ngannou, we see Stipe maintain that distance and not get too close to him, because he knows if he was to ever exchange with someone like Francis Ngannou, he will be lights out. Looking at the Francis Ngannou fight, he could easily do the same thing with Cormier, maintaining that distance, making sure DC cannot reach him, and he will be still heavyweight champion of the world.
DC is a natural heavyweight. Whenever he went down to light heavyweight, he always struggled. Let's take the instance for John Jones, where his main objective was trying to cut down weight, and this affected his game plan because he couldn't focus on going forward, cutting down the distance, or using a clinch. We can see how good DC is in the heavyweight division. He doesn't need to focus on cutting down to 210 pounds, and he's clearly in the limit of the heavyweight division. So now he can focus on what makes him so good and what made him a two-time world champion. And he can use this to beat Stipe. As we saw from the first fight, he used his wrestling, and he's going to use his wrestling again. And all his coaches say that his punching power has significantly gone up.
In the second fight, we've already seen him make those adjustments halfway through the fight, where instead of just hitting him to the head, which is a lot easier for a taller guy to hit a shorter guy in the head, he switched up the levels and he was able to underhook him into the ribs, which did the most damage and allowed him to knock him out at the end.
Stipe needs to worry about DC's wrestling and his raw power, because in the last two fights we saw how much the wrestling and the power affected him, and DC has improved his mistakes, so Stipe has to be worried.
Alright guys, that's our thoughts on the trilogy fight that's happening on the weekend. We all know that Stipe is going to still be the heavyweight champion of the world.
No, there's going to be a new heavyweight champion of the world. It's going to be DC. He's trying so much shit. Stipe, after this, go back to firefighting.